Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to do my review of WrestleMania 2. Starting off the evening with our first match of the night, it is Paul Orndorff versus Don Morocco. The match itself was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Orndorff and Don Morocco, with Orndorff keeping the pace of the match, but the match ultimately ends in a double countout. A couple of things I'll say about this match quickly, man, is that number one, this was a great opening matchup for WrestleMania 2. The downside of that, though, is that the match ended up ending in a double countout, man. I wish this was a clean finish because both Paul Orndorff and Don Morocco, absolute legends, and this could have stole the show for WrestleMania 2, in my honest opinion. But again, I just wish this match was a clean finish. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Randy Savage versus George the Animal Steel for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. Again, it was a good matchup, back and forth matchup between both Randy Savage and George the Animal Steel, with George keeping the pace of the match. But Randy ultimately hits a roll-up using the ropes. Referee was distracted by that, did not see Randy's legs on the ropes. Pins George the Animal Steel for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time still WWE Intercontinental Champion, is Randy Savage. Hats off to Randy Savage for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Jake the Snake Roberts versus George Wells. I thought this match was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both Jake Roberts and George Wells, with George keeping the pace of the match. But Jake ultimately hits his signature DDT on George Wells, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Jake the Snake Roberts. Hats off to Jake the Snake Roberts for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Roddy Piper versus Mr. T in a boxing matchup. Again, I thought it was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both Roddy Piper and Mr. T, with Piper kind of keeping the pace of the match. But the match ends by disqualification, and your winner of the match is Mr. T. A couple of things I'll say about this match. Number one, man, Roddy Piper, absolute legend, man. One of the guys that I feel like wasn't underutilized, but a wrestler that really was underrated in a lot of ways too, man, because Roddy Piper could have been a multi-time World Heavyweight Champion for WWE when he wrestled for WCW. It just wasn't there. Now, credit, he has won the Intercontinental Championship with WWE. Just, what Roddy Piper brought to the business. Piper's Pit was one of the best, segments that WWE had at the time, man. The whole Roddy Piper, Jimmy the Superfly Snuka in the Piper's Pit is legendary. The promos that he would cut, the interviews, and the amount of matches that he's had in his career, man. I mean, Piper, to me, in a lot of ways, is underrated. This guy changed the business and changed the way how to present the heel, in my honest opinion. And I think Roddy Piper was one of the greatest heels of all time. Mr. T, obviously, in this matchup, a little history between Roddy Piper and Mr. T stemming from their matchup they had at WrestleMania 1. This carries over into WrestleMania 2. And the boxing match, and I'm not completely against gimmick matches, but obviously, this gimmick match wasn't that bad. It really wasn't. I like the way they put it together. I just wish it was a clean kind of finish, if you will. But hats off to Mr. T for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the Fabulous Moolah versus Velvet McIntyre for the WWE Women's Championship. I thought it was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both Moolah and McIntyre. McIntyre was keeping the pace of the match. McIntyre then goes for a crossbody off the top rope, missed Moolah. Moolah then goes for the cover, pins Velvet McIntyre for the 3, and your winner of the match is the Fabulous Moolah. A couple of things quickly I'll say about this match is Velvet McIntyre. I thought this match was great. It was a great showing by Velvet McIntyre. And I thought she was going to win this matchup until that crossbody, and then she ended up missing Fabulous Moolah, and then obviously Moolah gets the cover for the 3. But Velvet McIntyre did a fantastic job. I mean, came out strong in the beginning of this matchup, and then obviously, the crossbody kind of cost her the match. But she did a phenomenal job in this matchup. But hats off to Fabulous Moolah for getting a win in this match. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Nikolai Volkov versus Corporal Kirchner in a flag match. Now, it was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup at first, with Kirchner keeping the pace of the match. Kirchner then hits Nikolai with Freddie Blassie's cane, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Corporal Kirchner. Again, don't know a lot about Kitchener, to be honest with you. Nikolai Volkov, obviously a legend. And this is one of those gimmick matches that I could have done without. I just didn't understand. Obviously I can get it because, Nikolai Volkov, they were, presenting him as, a wrestler from Russia, Corporal Kitchener, Army. I kind of get it, but I didn't understand it at first. And the match was kind of lackadaisical. And then obviously the finish that the match presented itself with having Freddie Blasie's King getting involved. I just wish it was a clean finish. But hats off to Corporal Kitchener for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Team WWE versus the NFL in a Battle Royal. It was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup with everybody involved, but Andre the Giant ultimately gets the win in this Battle Royal. Hats off to Andre the Giant for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card. It is the Dream Team versus the British Bulldogs for the WWE Tag Team Championships. I thought the match was a really good matchup, back and forth matchup between both teams. Dynamite and Davey were keeping the pace of the match. Davey then throws Greg the Hammer Valentine into Dynamite, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match, and at that time, new WWE Tag Team Champions are the British Bulldogs. A couple things I'll say about this match. Like I said, man, this was a good matchup. Big fan of the British Bulldogs, man. Underrated tag team, hands down. Big fan of Davey Boy Smith. Dynamite Kid, absolute legend, as well as the British Bulldog. And this was a good matchup, man. It really was. Both these teams brought it, but I have to give credit where credit's due, man. Hats off to the British Bulldogs for getting the win in this match, and at that time becoming the new WWE Tag Team Champions. Moving on from that, we go into our next match on the card as well. It is Hercules Hernandez versus Ricky Steamboat. I thought this was an okay matchup, back and forth matchup between both Hercules and Ricky Steamboat. Ricky was keeping the pace of the match, with Ricky ultimately hitting his signature crossbody off the top rope on Hercules, hitting him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Ricky Steamboat. Again, really good matchup. Hats off to Ricky Steamboat for getting the win in this match. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night as well. It is Uncle Elmer versus Adrian Adonis. I thought it was a decent matchup, back and forth matchup between Elmer and Adrian Adonis, with Elmer keeping the pace of the match. But Adrian Adonis hits a diving fist drop off the top rope on Elmer, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Adrian Adonis. One small thing I'll say about this matchup, man, it actually does not relate to this matchup, is Adrian Adonis. I don't know a lot about Adrian Adonis, but I remember specifically as a fan that there was a match, I think it was maybe Adrian Adonis versus Brutus the Barber, where I think Brutus Barber ended up cutting Adrian's hair off in that match, and Adrian Adonis just lost his mind in that match. I think it was at Wrestlemania, a couple years down the road. But it was absolutely hilarious. That was one thing that I always remembered about Adrian Adonis. But the match itself between Uncle Elmer and Adrian Adonis wasn't a bad match. But again, hats off to Adrian Adonis for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Terry Funk and Hoss Funk versus Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana. Although the match was okay, it was a back and forth matchup between both teams, with Junkyard Dog and Tito Santana keeping the pace of the match. Terry then hits Junkyard Dog with Jimmy Hart's megaphone. Terry pins Junkyard for the 3, and your winners of the match are Terry Funk and Hoss Funk. Hats off to the Funks for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our main event of WrestleMania 2. It is Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy in a steel cage match for the WWE Heavyweight Championship. Thought it was a great matchup, back and forth matchup between both Hogan and Bundy, with Bundy keeping the pace of the match. But Hogan hits a body slam on King Kong Bundy, and then Hogan goes to climb the cage. He ends up escaping the cage, and your winner of the match is Hulk Hogan. Again, great main event for WrestleMania 2, hands down. And honestly, the way the storyline was being built, Hogan was coming into this match hurt. He had like injured ribs or something. And King Kong Bundy is known for his big splash. Everybody was worried about what Bundy was going to do to Hogan. And, I think there was documentaries in the past that Hogan would talk about Bundy, and the crowd would just erupt for just based upon the size of King Kong Bundy and the moves that he would do, because nobody wants to take a splash from King Kong Bundy. Nobody. You know, King Kong Bundy, an absolute legend, underrated for sure, hands down. One of the best big men in the business, King Kong Bundy, and was completely underrated, in my honest opinion. But as far as my ratings, if you will, I was giving pay-per-views a rating from 1 out of 10. I would give WrestleMania 2 a 7, 7.5. Not obviously to me, not the greatest WrestleMania I've ever seen, but this definitely wasn't the worst. And a lot of decent matches on this card. You know, Hogan, obviously King Kong Bundy. Everybody wanted to see that main event. But the match setups were not that bad. I think the match of the night for me, honestly, was Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, just because the storyline of where this match was going, and the fact that it was a steel cage match, man, it was just awesome to see. But again, hats off to Hogan for getting the win in this matchup. But I'm gonna have to give WrestleMania 2 maybe a 7, 7.5 at best. But this is my review of WrestleMania 2. I hope you guys are out there staying safe, be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.